When Jacob was left behind alone, someone wrestled with him till the dawn came. And when he saw he couldn't master Jacob, he struck the joint of Jacob's hip, so that it was dislocated as he wrestled with him. "Let me go," he said, "the dawn has come." "I will not let you go," Jacob answered, "unless you bless me." "What is your name?" he asked him. He answered, "Jacob." "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel," he said, "because you have struggled with God and with men and have won." "Please tell me your name," Jacob said. "Why do you ask for my name?" he asked, and he blessed Jacob there. Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "I have seen God face to face, yet my life was saved." The sun rose on him as he passed Peniel, and he limped on account of his hip. To this day, the Israelites don't eat the muscle in the thigh at the hip joint, because he struck Jacob's hip joint at the muscle of the thigh. I'm Pastor Andrew Preuss, and this is Christendom in the World. Welcome back to Christendom in the World. I'm your host, Pastor Andrew Preuss, and I'd like to reflect a little bit with you on a major part of my childhood. When I was a child, I was a wrestler. And when I was younger, I played basketball and I wrestled, and they both kind of happened around the same time. In fact, in sixth grade, I would go to wrestling practice every day, and then twice a week after wrestling practice, I'd go to basketball practice. And then seventh grade came, and I had to pick between the two, and so I chose wrestling. Mainly because I was better at wrestling than I was at basketball. But also there's another reason, and that's something that always just kind of stuck out to me. You see, where I grew up, hockey was the big sport, and basketball was always popular as well as football. But hockey stuck out as the sport that if you played it, you had to invest tons of money into it. You had to start really young, like at age 5 or 6. You had to take skating lessons, and then you have to be buying new skates constantly as you get older, right? But the big thing, though, that stuck out was that hockey often would have games or even practices on Sunday mornings. And I would notice this with the kids in my class, that so many of them just hardly ever went to church, if at all. And so it was always just kind of ingrained in my mind that while I did get to know the sport of hockey because it was a big hockey town that we lived in, and I actually do enjoy watching it. There was clearly an obsession with it to the point where Sunday morning kind of took the back seat. But see, this was even happening with basketball. You see, when I was in sixth grade, I made the traveling team for the basketball, and one of the tournaments was over a Saturday and Sunday, and we had a game on a Sunday morning. And so I skipped the game to go listen to the Word of God at church, and then my mom drove me to the tournament on Sunday afternoon, and it still felt weird going there on a Sunday to play in a tournament that had, that everyone there had just skipped church to participate in. But at any rate, the next day, my friends at gym class made fun of me for it. And, they were just being stupid. And a lot of those kids, they grew up, and I was still friends with them. And I think a lot of them have kind of wised up. Maybe not all of them, probably. But at any rate, so it got to the point where then I was like, okay, I got to choose between basketball and wrestling. And so I thought, well, I'm going to wrestle. But it always stuck out to me, though, that no one ever asked me to wrestle on a Sunday morning. No one ever made me choose between my Lord's resurrection on Sunday morning and wrestling. And so I always kind of took some pride in that. And but then years later, I finished high school and I went to college and went to seminary, and then I came to Iowa. It was my first call as a pastor. This is back in 2014, and I was excited to get involved in the local wrestling. So I brought my young son to like little kid wrestling, and I was talking to the coach, and I was about to go through kind of the coaching stuff where you got to take training and stuff because I wanted to be involved in it. But then I saw that the youth wrestling tournaments were almost all on Sunday mornings. And so I just kind of pulled out and said, well, I guess it's not for me. And it was really heartbreaking because I always thought wrestling was sort of like kind of stood out, at least where I came from, as one that respected Sunday mornings. And maybe I was probably naive. I'm sure that there were other tournaments going on around the country, even when I was younger, that would just not respect the Sunday morning. And I want to address something, and I'm going to talk to Pastor Will Susan about this. I want to address something about sports that we want to avoid two ditches. We want to avoid the obsession with sports to the point where we give in to its dominance over people's lives, even to the point where they're not going to church. And they're basically replacing the communion of saints with the fellowship of athletes. But we also don't want to just become cynical and say, well, sports are stupid. I don't understand why people are so obsessed with sports. Because I do understand why people are obsessed with sports. Sports are great. They form culture, they form discipline, they form friendships, loyalty. They foster all of these good things. They're good for you. They're good for your body. And they even contribute to a sound mind. And I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And I would say, and I'm going to contend that wrestling is the best sport. And so Pastor Will Susan, let me just tell you one more story, all right, relating it to what we just read here. So I wrestled, and I wrestled all through high school, and I was a pretty good wrestler, but I was not elite. It was not. I didn't make it to state. I came close, I suppose, but it was no cigar. But I would say that I was a decent wrestler, right? And but the thing is about wrestling is that it's so humbling because you get beat and there are no excuses. You can't blame it on your teammate.
Nope.
No one forgot to pass you the ball or whatever. Nope. You got beat. And that guy handled you. He had control over you. And it's very humbling. And it teaches you, competitiveness, but it also teaches you that you are not the big dog. And I've always, so one of my favorite Bible stories has always been this story of Jacob wrestling with God. And so I'll relay one story with wrestling, a couple things. So when I first started wrestling when I was 10, and it was just like youth wrestling. And we go to practice a couple times a week, and the junior varsity coach ran it, Mr. Murphy, and he taught us the basics of wrestling. And then at the end of practice, he would say, all right, now we're going to do some conditioning. And it was the hardest conditioning I'd ever experienced, but it wasn't that bad. He'd have us like sit against the wall, do leg raisers, kind of these things that really, challenge you. And I thought, yeah, that's not too bad. 6th grade comes. Now in Minnesota, 6th grade is where you start junior varsity. 7th grade, you start varsity. Okay. Right? So there are a handful of states that do it this way. So I wrestled varsity in 7th grade and 8th grade, like 103 and 112 pounds, and then moved on from there. But in 6th grade, you wrestle junior varsity, which means you're wrestling with the varsity. Now we usually were able to leave a half an hour before the varsity finished. So we got kind of most of a taste of the varsity practices, but I'll never forget, it was during Christmas break where I went to practice, and I was there for the entire practice. And so I was there during the conditioning part at the very end of practice. And they would listen to this 80s music. These were a bunch of Gen Xers, and I'd never heard of Guns N' Roses before.
Oh, man.
Until I went or Metallica, which was maybe 90s, I guess, So we listened to this just really heavy metal stuff. And I remember doing conditioning, and he'd be like, sprint, sprint, and then keep jogging, sprint, sprint, get down, do push-ups. Okay, get down, do. It was just, I'd never experienced such torment in my life. And this is the conditioning training. And I remember then the coach then handed it over to, I think maybe the captains, and then they just, really
Even
drove
more.
us. They were like, and I became that. I was called a push-up Nazi. But when I was 12, I remember then being like my ribs were burning, everything was burning, and I was doing leg raisers, holding my legs like 2 inches from the ground, and I just wanted to give up. And we're listening to Welcome to the Jungle. And I hear Axl Rose then yell out, "You're gonna die." And I thought, I believe it. I feel like I'm gonna die. And I remember then years later, fast forward, then my junior year, I was in this tournament, and I had wrestled, I think, like 3 matches and it was like this really big tournament. And then I went to go get dressed, and I thought I was done for the day. And I was in the locker room, and all of a sudden my brother James runs in and says, "Andrew, they just called your name. You're on right now." And I'm like, "Oh shoot." So I ran and I wrestled this guy, and it was one of the toughest matches. And it came down, I think I beat him by 2, but it came down where like at the very end, it was in some kind of position. I can't remember what it was. I was on top, and I just could not let him escape or get a reversal. And it got to the point at the very end where all I had to do was just hold on. And you can't clasp in folk style wrestling, right? Otherwise you get a penalty point. But I was just holding on, and my forearms are just burning. That was a 6-minute match. Jacob wrestled with God. And I don't think that they had like folk style rules either.
Yeah.
But he wrestled with God all night long until the break of day. And I'm very thankful for all of those experiences. I still like to do hard things, I don't have a coach like driving me to almost die, so it's probably not quite as intense because I probably am not as hard on myself as someone else would be. But I think that this is really good. It was really good for me. And I think that sports are a wonderful thing if used correctly. So that's just a long introduction, a little bit of embellishment. I appreciate you listening to as I shared my lived experience with
there you go.
right?
Yes.
But what we see now is, so getting back to kind of the 2 ditches, what we see today is we have this obsession with sports, but then there's a reaction to it and this I think has been brewing for a long time, where people will say, well, sports are just kind of dumb and, it's whatever, people are too obsessed with it. And so we shouldn't even care about it. And I would say that both are wrongheaded. But you and I, we read this article that kind of gave us more to think about on this, by a guy named Trey Brock, who writes for Chronicles magazine, and this is just from Chronicles Online from last summer in July of 2025. And he writes this article called "Building the 21st Century American Athlete." What stuck out to me here was how he listed this study that showed that youth sports in the United States, and this is sometime in the last few years, this study came out, that youth sports in the United States bring in about $40 billion a year.
Yeah, that one was a shock.
In the U.S. alone.
Yes. But I can believe it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I want to read a little bit of what he says. I want to just kind of read a little excerpts of him, and then we can kind of comment on this. So he says, there is indeed an unhealthy obsession with sports in the West. And the money that is now required to, quote, get ahead in youth sports is absurd and unreasonable. But this should not cause American families to throw in the towel and abandon the world of athletics altogether. Sports have always been one of the more important and obvious means for restoring Western civilization by appealing to excellence. So what are your thoughts on that?
Sports definitely have a place in our lives to teach us discipline, to train our bodies, and in so doing, we also train our minds because you can't separate the two.
Mm-hmm.
So while I certainly do not want to throw sports away, I also think we have an unhealthy addiction to sports that we need to address as well.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned you wrestled because you didn't have to make that decision between church and the sport.
And to be fair, had I played basketball, it would have been fine with that because they didn't at that time.
Yeah.
Like you get into middle school, high school, and they're not scheduling stuff on Sunday.
No,
in fact,
not.
they didn't even,
Although
even on Wednesday nights.
Today, yes, they do. I have members of my congregations involved in club sports.
So club sports do.
Yeah, you're right. School sports
are still respectful
but
of that.
Club sports are.
Except I will say school sports, when I was a kid, back in my day, right?
Yeah. Back in the dark ages.
Yeah. Wednesday night was still sacred.
Yeah.
And that's not true
That is
today.
not true today.
And I mean they'll have games on Wednesday nights. So at any rate, sorry, you were saying though, I kind of interrupted you.
I don't know, what was I saying? We need to restore the balance. I liked the article and what he had to say there that yes, let's restore the balance. Let's see what's good about sports because there are good things about it to teach you to play as a team, to respect your fellow teammates and to work hard together. There's good things with that carry over into our society that we need to have.
Yeah.
But the obsession with it.
Yeah. Well, whenever you have an obsession with anything, what you inevitably end up doing is missing the point of the thing, right?
Yeah.
So it reminds me of what Luther says in his Heidelberg Disputations, where, a theologian of the cross, calls a thing what it is, right? It says a theologian of glory calls good evil and evil good. Mm-hmm. And here he's speaking in the context of suffering, but we could apply this to other things, because one of the things then that he says about the theologian of glory is that which is the bad. It's you don't want to be a theologian of glory, right? Yeah. Theologian of glory is someone who is basically just going to judge things based on what he can see instead of through faith in God's promise, right? But he says a theologian of glory uses the best things in the worst ways. Yeah. And that would include then something like athletics. That is a wonderful thing. And I think what's helpful for us then as Christians is to consider the purpose of that. What these good purposes are. And the thing is that there are lots of people who are in sports who do recognize this, but they're only kind of scratching at the surface. And I know, and I'm not very familiar with the whole like Fellowship of Christian Athletes. Mm-hmm. I know it's kind of a pan-denominational sort of thing, so it's not going to have a really solid doctrinal kind of stance. Nonetheless, though, I have seen, like, I follow wrestling, NCAA wrestling, and I've noticed over the last few years, more and more champions when they're getting, I mean, we're talking Big 10, Big 12 champions, and then NCAA champions, they're getting interviewed afterwards, and they're just like praising Jesus, right? Some of them you can tell are not as well grounded in it, Jesus gives the parable of the sower and the seed to warn about that. He warns about those who fall among the rocks, right? Mm-hmm. They don't have much of a root.
Right.
So, and the thing is, like, when your adrenaline is rushing and you get on fire for Jesus, well, you need more than just the adrenaline, right? You need You need study. You need and you need a community of believers. But what often happens, and I think that this comes from a sort of revivalist culture, in which is very much part of American culture.
Oh yeah.
Going back to like the Second Great Awakening, and these tent revivals, is that the religious community or the church becomes kind of nebulous. It sort of becomes like whatever you make of it. So I can find my church in this gathering of, common interest, people that we have a common interest and we get together, and then we might talk about Jesus. Now, I don't want to put that down. I'm glad that these people are finding other Christians and they're talking about Jesus with one another. But the thing is that a church needs to have a confession, right? That we need to this is why we have the creed, right? This is why we have the small catechism. We have a confession that actually binds us together, and we have a pastor. We have pastors, we have ministers, we have those who care for souls, right? We have the administration of the sacraments and that kind of stuff that Christ has given to his church. So while, you might find that mutual conversation among Christians, and I had this, my brother was in wrestling with me. My friend Matt went through confirmation at my church, and he wrestled with me. And then even my other friends who didn't go to my church, we would talk about Christ. We'd talk about issues all the time. And so we did have that. But that is no replacement for the fellowship of the saints around the word and sacrament. So, but he goes on though to talk about how historically this has been good for building Western civilization, right? So he mentions how the Greeks, were the first people to have athletics to play games, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, of course, you think of the Olympics.
The Olympics stuff. Right away,
and that he quotes Plato, who says that athletics and music, he kind of puts both of those together, that those are good for the soul. Now, of course, we know these guys are pagans,
sure,
but they do have some insight, right? And it makes sense then that you have people who they feel a connection, a real connection with other people and something greater than them, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is good, but it's sort of the Areopagus, do you know the God that you are worshiping?
Right.
And Christ has then come and he has wrestled the match, right?
Yeah.
And so what I was getting at then and I forgot to kind of make my point here. It sounded like I was just sort of telling some random story about a wrestling match where I had to just hold on and I was depleted. But that holding on reminded me of Jacob holding on to God and saying, I won't let you go until you bless me, right? And that's what faith does.
That's
right?
faith, yeah.
Faith is holding on and just all your strength is depleted. You can't depend on your strength. But the only strength you have is faith holding on to the promise. And so athletics can give us a mirror of that. It can give us a kind of shadow of that. But it's not. But when it replaces that, then we end up becoming sort of enslaved. Well, very much.
Very much. When athletics becomes your god, it makes a very horrible god.
Mm-hmm. Now, I'd like to bring up another issue. So one thing that people might say who are into athletics, one of the things that this guy points out is that it's very much middle class, maybe upper middle class. So you probably get the majority of the clubs and, and spending a lot of money. He mentioned that the average family in the United States spends about $1,000 a year on one kid. In sports. Mm-hmm. That's the average.
That's the average. I've known some families that have spent considerably more.
Yes. And so now, but here's the thing though, that people who are involved in sports, and I would say mostly for good reasons, what they'll say is like, well, why are you picking on sports? There are other things that
Okay.
people skip church for. They go camping, they go on vacation, or they just say, well, this is just our family fun time, or they go, they go out to eat and, they want to get a good, good spot during brunch at the at the buffet or whatever.
Or they just worship at the altar of St. Pillow.
Yeah, they worship at the altar of St. Pillow. Yeah, that's right. And that's the thing is that like the athletic families, just to give them some credit, these are the type of people who get up early and like grind, like that. They're disciplined people.
Oh yeah.
And this way, so it really does this. It demonstrates that this is good. Like this, sports in themselves are good.
Sure.
It can be very good for the
yes.
culture,
Yes.
right? And so this kind of gets at so why then are we picking on sports? Now, we would include all this other stuff and say, yeah, anything that makes you needlessly miss church. I mean,
Yeah.
besides like, okay, you work as a nurse and you have to just take shifts, and not everyone, you want to give other people a chance to have Sunday off, and someone needs to be there, or you're a prison guard or something like that.
There are those jobs that require you.
Yeah.
Aside from being a pastor, that requires you to work on Sunday.
There you go. Or like Jesus says, how many of you, if your donkey or your son is stuck in a ditch on Sabbath, right?
Get him out. Yes.
Yeah. So I mean, the as Jesus said about the Sabbath day, which of course is similar, to it's the spirit of it as we gather on the Lord's day to hear His word and to find rest in His word. But He said the Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath.
Right.
So all of that is true and important, and all those exceptions really should prove the rule. But why are we so focused on sports? Why are we specifically talking about sports?
I think in our own current environment that it has totally taken over. Mm-hmm. There has become an unhealthy obsession with sports that is keeping people away from the true things they need, like Christ, like His body and blood, like the fellowship of the believers of the body of Christ that gathers together to build one another up and to carry each other's burdens. And we totally have replaced, when I was doing my field work at the seminary, I would have to drive by on Sunday mornings going to and from the church that I was at, these soccer fields. Mm-hmm. It's on 270 in the St. Charles area. There would be, I don't know, probably somewhere close to 500-600 people out there, at least.
Like 9 a.m.
Yeah, 9 a.m. Yeah.
Yeah.
Rather than, they're there, and that means the church that they should be at is probably empty. Mm-hmm. Why have we allowed the sports mentality to so totally take over? Well, some of them will tell you, and I've had them tell me this, well, this is how I'm going to pay for college.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to get a scholarship.
Yeah.
And I did have a member who they were going to do that. They were going to college, they were going to play their sport in college, and now they're in college and they want nothing to do with that sport.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, I got worn out. I could have walked on, I'm sure. And I know other guys who did. And, like you think, I mean, anyone can be coached, or maybe not anyone, but a lot of people can be coached.
Sure.
And because I often think like, man, what if I would have just walked on? I probably would have done better in school and college.
Well, I have a son that we made him play sports because as long as he had something like that to do, he was a much better student.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And the studies show that. I mean, that's definitely
one sport at a time. I would not allow them to do two.
Yeah, sure. But even I got worn out. I was like,
sure,
I'm finished with it. Most people do, and Yeah. And so now, what do we say then to those who would? Some might make the argument saying, "Hey, I hear you. I don't like this either." But and they might even like maybe they're like, "Oh, we're gonna go to church on like Saturday night or something, or we're gonna find some other." Um, but we want to be there to try to be an influence on people and
Okay.
stuff like that. That, and obviously that, like, I'm glad that they are showing a dedication to making sure that they're going to church or they're doing devotions with their family and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And I'm very thankful for that. But what would you say to someone like that, just
Sure.
to consider?
You can do all this stuff. Number one, will you? Will you be?
Sure. And like, yeah, so like very
That's
small percentage,
point
but they're
one.
they're there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And point two, what are you actually missing out when you are not gathering together with the body of Christ?
But
What about all those people in the pew that need you there too?
sure. Yeah, so that
What about them? Are these people more important than those people?
yeah,
So how do we balance that?
sure. Yeah, so this is what I would say then, cuz you will have those, and I'm sure there are a lot actually. I don't know the studies. I would assume it's a pretty small minority, but you do have those who will actually go to church. So
Sure.
they won't neglect
Yeah.
the gathering,
Right.
right? And so whether that has to be, maybe they catch an early service on Sunday morning somewhere, or they have they schedule things out and they're disciplined,
Mm-hmm.
and that's good. And obviously that is, I would say, yes, at least do that. But this is what I would say though, kind of to your point, is your local congregation is not just a place that happens to be there that has the service that you like,
Yeah.
right? And yes, the main point is to be fed with the word and sacrament, and you can do that. You don't have to do that at your local congregation. You
Sure.
can find another faithful congregation somewhere else, and by all means do that,
do that
right?
when
And
I'm on
like we
vacation.
do that
Yeah.
exactly. We do that when we're traveling, and so you don't want to you don't want to set some kind of like burden on people's conscience, like, oh well, you should still feel guilty. Because I don't think, talking to these particular people who actually are diligent
Yeah.
in making sure their kids are in church, they should be commended for that. But I do think at the same time that just wisdom, it's good to reflect on the wisdom of gathering, of prioritizing your congregation, gathering with those with whom you regularly gather. And it's and because, like you said, it's the other people who are there.
Right.
They are encouraged by you being there.
Sure.
Right.
Sure.
And so I think that the other side of it too, though, is the expectation that you're going to be a good influence on the hundreds of people at some event,
Yeah,
or
so what
thousands of
happens?
people at some event.
Yeah.
That is not, I think that's a bit wrong-headed. You might have an influence on some people, and that's great. But most of your social interactions and the people that you get to know and that you grow close to, most of them, it's going to be a fairly relatively small group anyway. And it's going to speak very loudly to those people saying, oh yeah, we're missing the basketball game or the wrestling match Sunday morning.
Mhm.
Oh, why? Well, because we're going to our church, right? And or we're going to church,
Mhm.
right? And that, I think, that's going to speak very loudly to them. That's going to send a very clear signal to them. And I look back at like when I was in 6th grade and my friends made fun of me. And that's when I first learned what VeggieTales was, because they called me Church Boy. And then they asked me, do you watch VeggieTales? And I was like, what's that? And then they explained it to me. And I was like, that sounds really lame.
Yeah,
I was
pretty
like, is
much.
that what you watch? And but they just like assumed that I listened to Christian rock and stuff,
Yeah.
and you know,
Okay.
no, I go to church on Sundays and we have devotions at home, but yeah. Anyway, but anyway, sorry. The reason I brought that up is that some of those kids actually did. I think they did grow up, you know, and I think it was good, you know, to go through that. And like when if you get kind of ridiculed, you lose out on stuff, right? You know, that sends a witness to
It
people,
does.
right?
It does. Yeah. A very
And it
faithful.
can very much benefit them.
Sure. Unfortunately, too many of our families aren't sending that witness.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And that's the other thing too, then. So another point to make is, okay, for every one family that's super diligent and is like, they're going to be on top of, you know, making sure that they're going to church, but then still participate in the Sunday morning stuff and find a way to kind of have both.
Yeah.
For every one of those,
I've got one family.
there's
like
like, I don't know. Again, I don't know the studies here, but I would assume it's like 100 others
that.
or more
significant.
that never even think to
Right.
do that.
To do that. Right.
Right. So it's really just the whole like participating in the thing itself. You got to ask: is that really worth it? Right. I would
Right.
say no. I would say, I mean, my advice, if you want wisdom, if you want advice, I would say no. You just make it very clear. We don't participate in things that are undermining our confession.
Right.
We just don't do it,
And I continue to counsel.
whether implicitly or explicitly. Sorry,
I
go
continue
ahead.
to counsel the parents in my congregations that until you guys stand up and say that's enough, you can't have Sunday. Sunday is for our family, our church family, our family.
Yep.
Leave it alone. They're going to keep taking it.
Yeah.
That's how we got here, is people just quietistically going along and just letting it happen.
Yes, exactly. I'd like to read a little bit more of this guy, this article by Trey Brock. He talks about how, you know, this has modern sports culture has, instead of strengthening our culture, has really done a lot of damage. So
yes.
he speaks specifically of the, you know, of several things like, you know, the Super Bowl, and you know, being more important than the Lord's Day.
Yes.
The push of like gay pride and stuff, and you know, you go to a Cardinals game in June, right? And they push the gay pride.
Yep.
And so, I mean, that's the thing, is like, you have a young man, a boy who's like dreaming of a day to play in the MLB. It's like, well, hey, you know, that might be something that God allows you to do, you know, and there are people who are able to keep their
Sure.
soul in doing that. But,
Sure.
you know, we have to remember what Jesus says: seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness. And what good is it if you gain the whole world but forfeit your soul?
Yeah.
I mean, you have to just be aware of this stuff. And so, but what he says here though is I think this is a really helpful paragraph. He says the answer to a sports culture that breeds vice and immorality, and on top of that exploits the earnings of middle-class families who only want what's best for their kids, is not to blame the sports themselves. Instead, we should condemn a culture that improperly understands the purpose of sports and cannot recognize virtue, let alone organize activities meant to advance virtue in our youth. Blaming sports for our cultural rot gets us dangerously close to the extreme Puritans in the 16th and 17th century. Blaming sports for our cultural rot gets us dangerously close to the extreme Puritans in the 16th and 17th century, who embraced when they banned play and recreation on Sundays, and warned against the playing of sports in general. Athletics, Lincoln Harvey notes in his book A Brief Theology of Sport, was judged by the Puritans, quote, more trouble than it was worth. This is the definition of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. And so he goes on and says, today's extreme, which is just as bad, is to idolize sports. Think, for example, of the IMG Academy approach. For just $70,000 to $90,000 a year, you can send your teen to a private boarding school that places sports at the center of their education. Unfortunately, though, whatever may be said for that kind of focus in the abstract, this model of education in practice is doing what all secular education today does. That is, it conforms to the world. IMG's curriculum makes no mention of God, virtue, or truth, 3 realities required to make sports a worthwhile part of any curriculum. This is why IMG's leaders have no caution about the fact that the NCAA can now pay millions of dollars to 17 and 18-year-olds. This revolutionary and controversial change in collegiate athletics is not only something IMG has no problem with, but advocating for it has been part of the school's long-standing mission. And so he brings up that other, kind of symptom of all this is that that in the NCAA, and I have not really, it's been kind of confusing to me. I know that you have you can get your image. What is that called, Hannah? It's your image, it's like your brand. Like if you're in college sports.
I can't think of the name of it.
Oh man, image something. It's like 3 things. Yeah. And so basically,
and you can license that and sell it.
You license it and you make millions. And you make millions of dollars. So that's why, you get guys making millions of dollars in college.
Right. And now, are they actually going to school while they're in college? No. So what are they doing? They are professional athletes that the college is paying.
Yeah.
And now, because the way that NCAA has set things up, they can enter the portal every year and they can play for a new team every year. So and wherever they can get the best deal, that's where they go. And now we've just turned it into a money grab.
Yep.
Because, the reality is the colleges were and are, particularly the big ones, making substantial amounts of money off of the backs of these students, which maybe there was a problem there too.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So they were addressing. So what this is, it's like any kind of subversive movement. Is that what's it called? NIL.
Yeah.
So that'd be name, image, likeness. Thank you. Yeah. So they sell their NIL. But what they'll do is they'll address a problem. They'll recognize a problem
by creating another
by them creating another problem, right? And so really it's part of this kind of paradigm of if all you see, we've been trained to think this way in recent generations, to see everything as like the oppressors and the oppressed, right? Those who have the power and those who don't have the power. And so now we have to take some of the power and give it over here.
Well, we take all the power and we get it over here, and so the oppressor could now become the oppressed.
Yeah,
the
there you go.
Become the oppressor.
Yeah, then we get another synthesis, and we just kind of keep going in our Hegelian way, I guess. So, and that's not really the solution to the problem. The solution to the problem is to recognize what is our goal, what is our purpose, what is our duty, right? So our goal and purpose as Christians is everlasting life, right? That is to maintain the hope of everlasting life. And that's where bodily discipline comes in. Paul talks about this in 1 Corinthians 9, keeping your body in check so that you are not ruled by your passions. But of course, your hope is something that's guaranteed for you and kept for you in heaven. And you are preserved by the gospel of Jesus Christ, who died for you and rose again for you. But there is then this training that goes on, and you look forward to the goal. You look forward to and so your purpose in life is simple. It's to serve your neighbor and to love God, right? Fear, love, and trust in God and serve your neighbor. And then there's much to unpack with that. But if you can, if that is such, it's a simple goal and it's so freely given to us, that actually allows you then to bear that which is unfair, right? So even if the people are making money off of you, you don't have to. The way that you correct that is not by making sure that you get some of that money yourself, right?
Yeah.
The way that you correct that is by taking a step back and considering, do I have to be a slave to these, to these fat hats, right? No, I don't. Christ has redeemed me. He has, for freedom, Christ has set you free. So why would we give ourselves over to any yoke of slavery that would treat us as if we're just sort of potential investments for their wallets?
Yeah. The whole money thing in sports has gotten so far.
Mm-hmm.
I try to imagine why it is someone who is playing a game that was probably designed for junior high to high school age kids is making millions. And why are we spending millions to go watch them play that game?
Yeah. There's something else. I was talking about the humility of it. My kids, my two older kids have played sports mainly for the school.
Sure.
And they went to Emmanuel Lutheran. And it's just kind of what I like about it is that, they practice a couple times a week. And then when they play, they're up against these teams that are clearly playing all the time. And the kids are in club sports, on the off season. And most of our kids at the school, they're just going out for basketball when basketball season comes, and some of them play club stuff. You know, there's a few of them maybe who do, but it's not. And so it's interesting to see how it's kind of hard to watch actually. I mean, this is actually why, by the way, Hannah, I think volleyball is one of the best sports because sixth graders, when I watch sixth grade girls play volleyball, while you don't see as much volley, what you do see is the pace of the game adjusts to their level. Yeah. Right. And so some girls can't get it over the net, but maybe there's one girl who can. And then eventually you do find maybe one good volley. Right. But the score is going to remain, from what I've seen, it usually is pretty even. And, you might have some very dominant teams, but it's still kind of fun to watch. Whereas basketball, sixth grade basketball is torturous to watch because they're all terrible at basketball and it shows. No one knows how to pass the ball. Yeah. No one knows how to run a basic play. And then they pass the ball when they shouldn't pass the ball. They don't know how to just shoot. And that doesn't go away. It stays there until they gain some kind of confidence. And I guess one way to overcome that is by having them in these club sports where they really, really learn a lot. Okay, fine. So I get it. I get it's very difficult to watch kids who just don't have the time to have the training. But this brings up one of my favorite movies. Do you know what one of my favorite movies is? The Sandlot.
Okay.
Have you seen that?
Yes.
Have you seen The Sandlot? What's awesome about The Sandlot is that these are boys who just get together.
Yeah.
No one told them to.
They're just out there playing.
Yeah. And then there's that scene where they start arguing with these guys who are on the professional team. They're in the organized team. And they're, you play baseball like a girl, that kind of, they're just talking smack to each other. And then what do? They go and play.
Yeah.
And, the kind of rough around the edge boys who just go out and play all summer long with each other.
Yeah.
they destroy the little league team. And it's such a great scene because it shows the organic culture of the neighborhood boys who don't need helicopter parents to come in and, make sure that everything is safe and going well. They don't need that. They get the black eyes, they get hurt, they run away from dogs, stuff like that. I mean, it's such a great movie.
It is.
It shows an American
Killing the
pastime that has basically disappeared. And like when they have to get home for dinner, they have to get home for dinner.
Yeah.
There's some times when they just can't go out and play, but once they are able to go out and play, once their parents allow it, they go out and play.
Yeah.
And if that is our culture, then I think we're much more on the right track. And I noticed this in Africa when I was there, and you were in Africa. Did you see them playing soccer? Again, it's just like no one had to tell them.
Yeah.
And they're amazing. How many of those African guys playing soccer do you think were in some like club soccer league?
Yeah,
None of them.
No, they don't.
And they would wipe the floor with any of our soccer players. Most of our soccer players today, just these regular guys who are there to like study theology at the Lutheran School of Theology. And it was kind of funny because I don't think that we weren't supposed to install this basketball court, but it kind of happened by mistake. And Pastor May was in the United States at the time, and there was just a miscommunication, and he was a little annoyed that it was put there. And none of them play basketball. Instead, what do they do on the basketball court? They play soccer. Yeah. And they have incredible control of the ball. They'll be right on the edge of the concrete, and then it can easily just fall in down the hill, and they just have total control. And again, they don't play any organized sports. Now, that's not to say that there's no room for organized sports.
Sure.
But when you are organizing anything, you are a steward of what God gives, and you have to consider what the goal is.
Right.
And if you miss what the goal is, or you undermine that goal,
so what do you think the goal is for most of our student athletes and their parents in these organized sporting?
I think that for a lot
currently, what is it?
Yeah.
What do we want it to be? What is it?
Okay, so I do think that they naturally have noble goals that are obvious, right? So they get together with kids their age. They learn teamwork, right?
Yeah.
They learn loyalty.
Sure.
They learn bodily discipline. And then there is the concept of dreaming big. That's the part that often gets a bit tricky or just kind of corrupted. That there is there is this goal of like, well, or maybe an expectation. Oh, I'm going to play professionally, or I'm going to play in college or whatever. But part of that though is just they learn by the time they're in high school that like, yeah, I'm not going to do this my whole life, right? I'm not. I'm not a prodigy, and and a few of them are, and you kind of learn that as you mature. So I think that they understand, just because it's very hard to miss that there's a lot of virtue that's in that you learn from it.
Sure.
So I don't think that the average like athletic family is somehow missing the basic goals and benefits of athletics that are, and they're not, or that they're missing like the virtues, because it's so obvious, right? Now it might depend on where you are, right? So it might depend on different settings, where some of them are just like, especially if you're spending like 70, 80, 90,000 a year, because you want your kid to make it to the professionals. Okay, that's at another level, right? Most people aren't doing that.
Yeah.
So I do think that they have they're learning a basic hands-on lesson of virtue. What they're missing though is the one thing needful being the priority. And that when you go to church itself is cultivation. Church itself is training, right? And I think that one of the symptoms of a deeper issue is the way that our churches have treated church. We need to have a contemporary service and a traditional service. We need to have a youth service. We need to have a boomer service. We need to have a millennial service. We need to whatever.
Yeah. Have
Right?
children church.
Cultivated
and
or
adult church,
contextualized cultural or all this sociological jargon that rules how we see church. Church is, yes, where we go to receive the word of God, the gospel, the sacrament, be strengthened in our faith, but this includes a lot of training. So it's like whenever someone comes to you and says, "Oh man, someone's not used to the liturgy," and says, "Oh man, I don't know, this is kind of difficult." What do you say?
Give it time.
Give it
Keep
time.
trying.
Exactly.
Keep coming back, set with somebody who can help you through it.
Exactly. So what would a coach say to a boy who's like, I don't know if I can do this?
Keep coming.
Keep coming. If he's a good coach. If he's a jerk, he'll say, all right, well, I'll just find someone else, right? But a good coach is going to take you under his wing. He's going to say, hey, I'm not going to change the rules of the game for you,
right?
To meet you. No, I will in the meantime meet you where you are, but there's still there's a discipline here. There's a structure here. And no one ever questions that with sports. But with church, with the divine service, I mean, this is what has been shoved down our throats for so many years, that we need to quote unquote be all things to all people, as St. Paul says, right? Is St. Paul saying that we should throw out the liturgy and bring in some kind of band that is trendy and makes people and bring in their coffee and their and they can sit. The church is just a time for them to just sort of get comfortable. So when someone says, "Oh, Pastor, that was a difficult hymn to sing," good. I'm glad it was difficult. Keep trying.
Keep trying.
It's good that it's difficult.
We'll keep singing it.
And I'm not going to make it needlessly difficult, but it's a good hymn, right? I'm teaching the kids right now, Christ Jesus Lane's Death Strong Bands, a Martin Luther hymn, the best Easter hymn there is. Hands down, objectively, not even my opinion. It's just true. I'm being a little bit hyperbolic there, but it is a fantastic hymn. And it's not the way, the tune, people aren't used to that tune. Not. But you know what? It's a beautiful tune when you get to know it. And why is it that we can treat sports this way, as it should be treated, in this basic kind of way that it's training, no one ever said it was going to be easy, all that kind of stuff, just discipline, execution, discipline, adversity, right? That's what my son Jacob and we like to joke about the cliches, oh yeah, I just saw adversity and teamwork and, all this stuff. It's there. So I think it would pair really well if we looked at church through that lens, as Paul tells us of disciplining our body, right? And I'm not talking about some monasticism, as Paul warns about in Colossians, of this kind of show of humility. But so anyway, I mean, what would you say then is what they're missing? And would you agree that most people who are in athletics, most families who are involved in athletics, are getting a surface level exposure to what is really good and beneficial and virtuous about it?
Sure.
I mean,
but then what do they actually focus on? Winning.
Winning, sure. Yeah, of course.
Winning.
I don't want to lose.
Who wants to lose? Sure. But is that life? What's that teach?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's a hard lesson to learn. I remember there was this very kind man who was a father. He was the father of one of my teammates in wrestling, and I would be down when I lost a match, and he'd be like, he'd always say, "Well, did you have fun?" And I'm like, "No." And then he'd see me after I'd win a match and be like, "Did you have fun?" I was like, "Of course I did. I just,
Yeah.
I just took it to the mat."
But which one did you learn more from?
Oh, definitely losing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean that, but the thing is, at the time, as Paul says, right? Because Paul wrote Hebrews, right? No discipline. Yeah. I mean, probably. Let's just say it's Paul. Hebrews chapter 12, right? That no discipline is enjoyable at the time.
Yeah.
Right.
Sure.
But yeah, definitely losing is good for you. I think that losing can be bad for you if it's like, if it's kind of a cruel and unusual sort of, there can be a bit of like, of that. But no, I'd say generally though, when you get beat, that's good for you. It teaches you humility. And it also teaches you to comfort one another.
Sure.
But also to hold each other accountable and encourage each other.
Yeah. And then, okay, let's learn from what we did wrong here so we can not do that the next time.
Sure. So, no, I think you're right. But see, my point, though, is that even an unbeliever can tell you, while I do think that is very, that is a Christian mindset, that you should be content in your losing. Christ's strength is made perfect in weakness. But even an unbeliever can recognize the benefit in losing and learning from, your mistakes. The greatest athletes are going to tell you that, whether they're Christians or not.
Yeah.
And so my point is that what makes sports so powerful and why it's such a challenge is that they do cultivate those virtues. And, so it'd be like if you try to talk to a Mormon, for example, about why he should, and again, I'm not saying that if you're playing sports that you're like a Mormon, okay? That just as a comparison though. Why is it so difficult to talk to a Mormon? Because the Mormon is thinking entirely about the moral, the benefits, right? The character development, all that stuff. The Mormons got that down, right? They got that down. They major in that, right?
Sure. So
if it's simply about the just cultivating these virtues, then I think that we're missing the boat on it. But it needs to be about faith. How does faith come? By the word. And also, how is faith tested and trained? And it's trained in your station in life. And it's trained in your communion with the communion of saints. And again, so that's why I would emphasize that, we got to get back to how we see church. That church is a kind of training.
Yeah.
That's not all it is, right? It's also a time of rest.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
So I don't know. I mean, maybe, but I would agree with you though that there is a pride of life, right? Which would be then like, oh, I just want to win.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There is a pride of life that St. John warns us against, right? And we also shouldn't ignore the lust of the eyes too.
Yeah.
There can be great vanity that comes into all of this as well.
Yeah.
Because you get a good physique and all that kind of stuff. That plays into it as well.
Sure.
And again, that's not to say that everyone falls into that, but there are temptations that when you're not focused on, the kingdom of God and His righteousness, then you become susceptible to these.
And if you are allowing the sports to take you away from that central part of your life as a body of Christ together, you have just made that temptation that much more real, that much greater, that much more irresistible for yourself.
Yeah.
there's a reason that we need to have rightly ordered lives. And
Yeah.
that's my problem with our current sports idolization,
Yeah.
is it takes away the order.
Yeah.
It's not that sports are bad. They're not. I played sports. I liked sports. I enjoyed playing. I enjoyed watching my kids play. I enjoy watching it now and even participating in it. But there is still a right order that we need to maintain in our lives.
Yeah. And actually the more that you talk, I think I actually do agree with you that really is at the heart of it, even if they don't realize
Yes.
that at the heart of it is the need to win, or the need, to put it another way, the need to be at a certain level.
Yeah.
Right. So take, for example, our high school.
Mm-hmm.
We're starting this Lutheran high school. It's going to be very small at first.
It's going to be very small, yes.
What if we start, let's say we do have a basketball team, in a few years probably, because it's going to take a while to build up to that. Yeah. But let's say it takes a few years and we have a basketball team. Yeah. Do you think that they're going to win state? Likely not.
No, the fact is they won't even be in the competition for that because they'll start out as a JV team.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's right. So they will not be at that caliber. And you know what? They probably never will be. I mean,
we might occasionally.
See, then I become like the bad guy in the movie.
Who knows?
That they'll make a movie about them, and then they'll have like,
they'll
have me, because this will actually be online.
And we're gonna show him.
Yeah, we're gonna show him. It's like they had their doubters. Yeah, that's right. But yeah, that's like what would deter people. A big thing that would deter people from going into a Lutheran high school. And again, I don't want to you might have various reasons, right? So it's not about the Lutheran high school as such.
No.
It's not about our project and support our project, or you don't care about ministry. No, that's a terrible, and too many people think that way and take such idolizing ownership of their ministry. No, that's not the point. But it still is interesting that a big reason why a lot of people don't want to go to a little high school that focuses the startup high school that focuses on Christian education is because they don't have the sports. And it's not just that they don't have sports, because we could easily organize softball games, right? Exhibition softball games.
Sure.
Our churches used to do that. We used to have, when I was a kid, we had a softball team. And we'd play against other churches.
Sure.
And some churches, some areas, they still do that. When I was in Fort Wayne, I was on the Fort Wayne softball team. We'd play against the other churches. And these are things that we can do.
Sure.
And this gets to, I think, really at the heart of it is, in whatever you do in the name of the Lord Jesus, giving thanks to God the Father through him, and that you be content. Yeah. And so if you're, I've told my son, Jacob, he's going to be one of the first students at this high school. He's not going to be able to play sports. He might be able to do track or something, or cross country, something that doesn't require a bunch of people, more individual sports. But I told him, I said, this is good for you. It's good for you to learn to still be active. I said, you know what? We're still going to go work out together. We're still going to be active. And it's good for him to not lose heart and to not think that, oh, well, just because I'm not in this kind of caliber or status, that means I'm not an athlete. No, you're an athlete. You want to be an athlete. We'll continue to do that. And we'll take what comes as we go along.
As you were reading, and as I read through the story that you sent, that article, it struck me with that IMG Academy.
Oh, yeah.
That their center was sports.
Yeah.
And I was just comparing that to what we, as we're putting together this Lutheran High School, Christ King Lutheran High School, our center is Christ.
Yeah. Yeah.
That we start there and build out, and they're starting with sports and building out.
Yeah.
It's gonna be totally different.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that's and the thing when you center in Christ, you actually it gives you a perspective on how you are active in your body and in your soul and in your mind and every aspect of it. So yeah, I mean, we don't want this to be just simply a place for the unathletic, although it should be that too. Not
sure.
everyone's as coordinated, right?
Absolutely.
But you don't want to just like, curse the call the grapes sour because you can't get to the grapes, right? And I think that's something that's an Aesop fable, where it's, I think a fox or something is reaching for the grapes and you can't get them, and he says, "Oh well, they're sour anyway," right? So this should not be our reaction to the kind of idolizing of sports and the craziness of it, which is documented, right? This is like, even if you have everything kind of figured out, you have to admit that it is insane. I mean, we're talking $40 billion a year, right? So that's insane. That there is clearly an obsession with sports that does bear rotten fruit, even if there are many virtuous people who make good use of it.
Sure.
But when we react against this, we shouldn't be like the fox. I think it was a fox in Aesop's fable, and just to say, well, they're just a bunch of jocks anyway. No. The other thing too is that Christ desires all. He died for all people, and God wants to embrace all people, right? And so, so what are some things that we could do as Christians, to promote athletics and to promote the kind of virtues that go along with that? Or maybe what are some things that we do already that maybe we could build on more?
That's a good question. I think we have bought into the bifurcation of life in our world where, that's secular and this is religious, and nary shall the twain meet.
Yeah.
In our current world. So, okay, you go to church on Sunday morning and then the rest of it is something else. And maybe we need to get back with, maybe it's as simple as on a Sunday afternoon, the church is sponsoring a chance for the families just to come together and have that softball game you were talking about.
Yeah.
I know at one of my congregations, now there's a lake there. Used to, that was the softball field. Ebenezer, yeah.
Yeah, at Ebenezer. Yeah. Nice. Yeah. No, and I would agree with that. I think that is, and of course this isn't to say like, oh, quit all your sports and just play church softball. No, that's not the point
either.
But like, you find satisfaction. If you can learn to find satisfaction and a sense of like all of the virtues that come along with, and the joys that come along with sports, that camaraderie, use of your body, use of your mind, even a bit of a friendly banter that goes along with it. If you can learn to do that more often with your fellow Christians, with those that you actually sit in the pews with and sing the same hymns with. That is going to go a long way. It's going to teach you that to be content. We had last month for our monthly youth gathering for the circuit, we played softball, and it was funny because Ruth was like, "Yeah, we're gonna play softball because it's nice out, right? Because it was just a nice February day.
Yeah. I don't
but
think we're gonna
it's
do it
before daylight savings.
Yeah.
So what happened? It got dark.
Yeah.
Well, then what was so cool was then Ruth went and grabbed her pickup truck, and then she came and just parked right by the field and was just shining the light on us, and it was just so gritty. It was great. We didn't have like the big lights and stuff, which would have been nice if we did. Yeah. But it was so fun, and it was competitive, but it also was like we weren't taking ourselves too seriously.
Yeah.
And everyone had a great time. I think if we do more of those kinds of things,
that would go a long way.
It would go a very long way. And then then we had a Bible class afterwards. Again, there's no like silver bullet on this. This isn't like we don't want to slip into some kind of Methodism or, be like the Puritans and be like, this is wrong.
Yeah.
You got to follow this kind of regimen, And no, what this is about is finding contentment in the training together that we have, and, your best, your closest comrades, brothers really should be, and your sisters, right? Which I include that, obviously.
Sure. Boy,
Adelphoi includes brothers and sisters, right?
Well, yeah. Just look at the notes in the ESV.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah. That's going to cultivate more and more that brotherhood. So, well, do you have any other final thoughts on any of this stuff?
At this point, no. I think we covered what I wanted to say.
Yeah, well, that sounds great. Let me just end then with one portion of scripture, and we alluded to it earlier. I'd like to end our discussion with what Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 9. 1 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 23, beginning with verse 23. I'm doing everything for the good news in order to have a share of what it gives. Don't you know that all who are in a race run, but only one wins the prize? Like them, you should run to win. Anyone who enters a contest goes into strict training. Now they do it to win a wreath that withers, but we to win one that never withers. So I run with a clear goal ahead of me. I fight and don't just shadow box. No, I beat my body and make it my slave, so that when I've called others to run the race, I myself will not somehow be disqualified. Yeah. Thank you for listening to Christendom and the World, and thank you, Pastor Will Susan, for joining us again. And join us next time for another episode.